Chapter 1. The Miracle of Pinewood. Pinewood, Montana wasn't the kind of place that appeared on most maps. Nestled between rolling hills and bordered by dense forests, the town of just over 3,000 souls prided itself on three things: the annual Cherry Festival, their undefeated high school football team, and the fact that everybody knew everybody. Main Street consisted of a handful of family-owned businesses, a diner that hadn't changed its menu since 1975, and the white steepled church that stood as the tallest structure for miles around. It was the kind of place where time seemed to move a little slower, where traditions were sacred, and where change came reluctantly, if at all. Emily Sullivan loved it all. At 7 years old, she embodied everything the town valued: innocence, kindness, and a smile that could melt even the sternest of hearts. With her golden curls and bright blue eyes, Emily was the unofficial mascot of Pinewood Elementary, the pride and joy of her parents, Sarah and Michael Sullivan. Sarah ran the local bookstore, a cozy establishment that served more as a community gathering spot than a profitable business. Michael worked as the town's veterinarian, a position that made him privy to both the joys and sorrows of Pinewood's residents through their beloved animals. Emily was their miracle child, born after years of trying, a gift they never took for granted. That child's got something special about her, people would often say. And it wasn't just the kind of thing folks said to be nice. Emily possessed a natural empathy that seemed almost otherworldly. She was the first to comfort a classmate with a scraped knee, the one who would sit with old Mr. Jenkins at church when everyone else avoided his grumpy demeanor. "She's an old soul," her teacher, Ms. Wilson, once remarked during a parent-teacher conference. "Sometimes I forget she's only 7. That Wednesday in April began like any other spring day in Pinewood. The morning air carried the sweet scent of wildflowers, and the sky stretched endlessly blue above the mountains. Ms. Wilson had organized a nature walk for her second-grade class, a cherished tradition to celebrate the arrival of spring. The children lined up in pairs outside the red brick schoolhouse, lunch packs in hand, and excitement bubbling through their conversations. "Remember to stay with your buddy," Ms. Wilson instructed, adjusting her wide-brimmed hat against the sun. "We're going to collect leaves for our science project, so keep your eyes open." Emily stood at the front of the line, paired with her best friend Lily Chen, whose family owned the town's only Chinese restaurant. The two girls had been inseparable since kindergarten, united by their love of books and their shared birthday. "I'm going to find the biggest leaf in Montana," Lily declared, swinging her collection bag. Emily laughed, the sound like tiny bells. "Then I'll find the prettiest one." The class set off down the dirt path that led to Pinewood Creek, a gentle stream that wound its way through the valley. The children chatted excitedly, pointing out butterflies and discussing which leaves would earn them the most gold stars on their collection charts. Ms. Wilson walked alongside them, occasionally stopping to identify a particularly interesting plant or bird. They had reached the creek's edge, where a wooden footbridge crossed over to the meadow beyond, when Emily suddenly stopped walking. "Emily," Lily tugged at her friend's sleeve. "Come on, I see some super cool leaves over there." But Emily didn't respond. She stood motionless, her gaze fixed on something distant, something no one else could see. Ms. Wilson noticed the pause and turned back. "Emily, honey, are you feeling okay?" The teacher's question hung in the air for a moment before Emily's small body crumpled to the ground, as sudden and silent as a marionette whose strings had been cut. The scream that tore from Lily's throat shattered the peaceful morning. "Mrs." Wilson rushed forward, dropping to her knees beside the fallen child. "Emily! Emily, can you hear me?" The other children gathered around, their excited chatter transformed into fearful whispers. Ms. Wilson pressed 2 fingers against Emily's neck, her own heart racing. "She's breathing, but her pulse is very weak. Tommy, run back to the school and tell Principal Davies to call 911 now." The young boy took off running, his sneakers kicking up dust on the path. Ms. Wilson cradled Emily's head in her lap, her teacher's training keeping her outwardly calm while panic bloomed inside her chest. "Everyone else step back and give her air," she instructed, her voice steady despite her fear. Emily's face had gone pale, her lips taking on a bluish tinge that made Miss Wilson's stomach knot with dread. The wait for the ambulance seemed eternal, though it couldn't have been more than 10 minutes. The paramedics arrived with a flurry of activity, their professional voices and equipment bringing a clinical reality to the surreal scene. 7-year-old female, unresponsive, no known medical conditions, one of them reported into a radio as his partner checked Emily's vital signs. Sarah Sullivan arrived just as they were loading her daughter into the ambulance, her face a mask of terror. She had been restocking shelves when the call came and had dropped everything, leaving the bookstore door wide open in her haste. "What happened? Is she okay, Emily?" She pushed through the gathered crowd, reaching for her child's hand. The paramedic's expression was grim. "Ma'am, we need to get her to the hospital immediately. Her vitals are critical." Sarah climbed into the ambulance, her eyes never leaving Emily's still form. Ms. Wilson promised to call Michael and to bring Lily to the hospital later. The girls were so close, she knew Lily would be devastated if kept away. As the ambulance doors closed and the siren wailed to life, a strange wind swept through the trees surrounding the creek. Several of the children later claimed they heard what sounded like distant hoofbeats, though no horses were kept in that part of town. By nightfall, the news had spread through Pinewood like wildfire. Emily Sullivan, the town's beloved child, was in critical condition at County General Hospital. The doctors were baffled. All her tests showed a catastrophic failure of multiple systems, but they could find no underlying cause, no injury or infection that would explain the sudden collapse. In the hospital waiting room, Michael held Sarah as she sobbed against his shoulder. Friends and neighbors filtered in and out, bringing coffee that grew cold and food that remained untouched. Pastor Allen from the white-steepled church led a prayer circle that spilled out into the hallway, their whispered pleas rising like smoke. Chapter 2. When Hope Fades. Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan. Dr. Eleanor Martinez stood in the doorway of the small consultation room, her white coat pristine, but her eyes revealing the weight of the news she carried. Sarah gripped Michael's hand so tightly that her knuckles turned white. The clock on. The wall read 11:42 p.m. They had been at the hospital for nearly 12 hours. "Please," Sarah whispered, "tell me she's going to be okay." Dr. Martinez took the seat across from them, placing Emily's chart on the table between them. Her movements were deliberate, buying precious seconds before she had to speak the words that would shatter their world. "Emily's condition is extremely serious," she began, her voice gentle but clinical. "We've run every test we can think of, consulted with specialists, but we still don't have a clear explanation for what's happening to her body." Michael, who had maintained his composure throughout the ordeal, felt his professional detachment crumbling. As a veterinarian, he understood medical terminology, knew the signs of a losing battle. "Just tell us straight, doctor, please." Dr. Martinez met his gaze directly. "Multiple organ systems are shutting down. Her brain activity is minimal. We've put her on life support, but..." She paused, taking a breath. "I have to be honest with you both. The prognosis is not good. We're doing everything medically possible, but you should prepare yourselves for the worst." Sarah's wail echoed through the sterile hallways of the hospital, a primal sound of maternal anguish that caused nurses at the distant station to look up with pained expressions. Michael wrapped his arms around his wife, his own tears falling silently into her hair. Dr. Martinez waited patiently, allowing them this moment of raw grief. When Sarah's sobs quieted to hiccuping breaths, the doctor continued. "You can see her now, talk to her. Some patients can still hear even in this state, and I want you to know that we won't give up." The walk to the pediatric ICU felt like their journey through a nightmare. The beeping of machines, the antiseptic smell, the hushed voices, everything was too sharp, too real. Emily lay in a bed that seemed enormous for her small frame. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that breathed for her, monitored her failing heart, delivered medications in a desperate attempt to stabilize her condition. Sarah collapsed into the chair beside the bed, taking Emily's limp hand between her own. "Mummy's here, baby. Mummy's right here." Michael stood at the foot of the bed, a man drowning on dry land. How could this be happening? Just this morning, Emily had bounded into the kitchen, excited about her class nature walk, chattering about the leaves she would find. Now the only sound was the rhythmic whoosh of the ventilator and the steady beep of the heart monitor, each tone a reminder that his daughter still clung to life, however tenuously. Over the next 24 hours, Pinewood rallied around the Sullivan family. The town's residents organized a prayer vigil on the hospital lawn. Emily's classmates made cards and paper flowers. Meals appeared at the hospital waiting room for Michael and Sarah, who refused to leave the building. Lily Chen, devastated by her friend's condition, convinced her parents to bring her to the hospital, where she sat quietly beside Emily's bed, reading aloud from their favorite storybook, as if nothing were wrong. On the second night, Dr. Martinez approached them again, her face grave. "There's been no improvement," she said softly. "In fact, her readings are continuing to decline. I think it might be time to discuss your wishes regarding extraordinary measures." The medical jargon couldn't disguise the brutal truth. They were asking if Sarah and Michael wanted to turn off the machines. "No," Sarah said firmly, her voice hoarse from crying but resolute. "Not yet, please," Dr. Martinez nodded. "We'll continue for now, but I want you to think about what Emily would want. Sometimes the most loving decision is also the most difficult." As she left, Michael turned to his wife. "Sarah, we need to consider—" "Don't say it," she cut him off. "Don't you dare say it. She's going to wake up. Our Emily is a fighter." But by the third day, even Sarah couldn't deny the inevitable. Emily's condition had deteriorated further. The specialists had exhausted every treatment option. The machines were no longer supporting her. They were merely postponing the unavoidable. When Pastor Allen suggested they might want to consider planning a service, Sarah didn't protest. The hospital's grief counselor spoke with them about organ donation, about the legacy Emily could leave by helping other children. Michael handled these discussions while Sarah sat by their daughter's bedside, stroking her golden curls and singing lullabies in a broken voice. Back in Pinewood, the community prepared for the worst. Ms. Wilson gathered Emily's classmates and tried to explain in gentle terms why their friend wouldn't be returning to school. The town's florist, Mrs. Henderson, began preparing arrangements with Emily's favorite flowers, daisies and sunflowers. The church basement was stocked with casseroles and baked goods for the reception that would follow the service. On the morning of the fourth day, Dr. Martinez performed her final examination. The EEG showed virtually no brain activity. Emily's body had begun to shut down entirely, despite the machines keeping her heart beating and her lungs inflating. With infinite gentleness, she explained to the Sullivans that it was time. "We can remove the ventilator here, or we can transport her. Home if you prefer. We'll ensure she feels no discomfort. You can hold her, be with her until the end." Sarah and Michael, exhausted beyond tears, made their decision. They would take their daughter to Pinewood's chapel for a private goodbye before the public service. The hospital staff, many of whom had grown attached to the Sullivan family during their vigil, prepared Emily with tender care. They dressed her in the yellow sundress Sarah had brought from home, Emily's favorite, the one with tiny butterflies embroidered along the hem. They brushed her hair and placed her cherished stuffed rabbit, Hoppy, beside her. The ambulance. Transport was arranged with no sirens, no rush. Emily's condition was beyond urgency now. As Michael helped Sarah into the back of the vehicle, a strange calm had settled over them both. The eerie stillness that comes when grief exceeds the body's capacity to express it. The news spread quickly through Pinewood. By the time the ECC's ambulance arrived at the small white chapel on Main Street, a crowd had gathered outside. They stood in silence, heads bowed, as Michael carried his daughter's small body inside. The chapel had been prepared with care. Sunlight filtered through stained glass windows, casting rainbow patterns across the simple wooden pews. At the front, a small white casket lay open, surrounded by Emily's favorite books, photos of her laughing with friends and family, and mountains of flowers from the townspeople. Sarah and Michael sat in the front pew, numb with grief. Pastor Allen spoke quietly with them, offering words of comfort that seemed to float past them, meaningless in the face of their loss. Family members arrived, Sarah's parents from Idaho, Michael's sister from Colorado, their faces etched with the helpless anguish of those who can share but not lift the burden of such sorrow. The hospital had removed most of the medical equipment before transport, leaving only the monitors that confirmed what everyone already knew. Emily Sullivan's condition was irreversible, her physical form present, but her vibrant spirit seemingly gone. As the afternoon light began to wane, more townspeople filtered into the chapel for the private viewing. They approached the casket one by one, offering tearful condolences to the parents before taking their seats. Ms. Wilson brought several of Emily's closest friends, including Lily, who placed a carefully pressed leaf in her friend's casket, the prettiest one she could find, just as Emily had wanted. "We'll begin the service shortly," Pastor Allen announced softly. "If anyone would like to share a memory of Emily, please let me know." But as he moved to the pulpit to prepare his notes, a sound cut through the somber silence of the chapel, the distinct clip-clop of hooves on pavement. Several heads turned toward the doors, momentarily distracted from their grief. Chapter 3. The White Horse. The sound grew louder, more insistent, drawing closer to the chapel doors. Mrs. Henderson whispered to her husband, "Must be one of the Thompson horses got loose again." But something about the rhythm of those hoofbeats seemed deliberate, purposeful, not the erratic pace of a runaway animal. The heavy wooden doors of the chapel stood partially open to the late afternoon air. Through this opening, the mourners watched in collective astonishment as a horse appeared in the doorway. Not just any horse, but a magnificent white stallion with a coat that seemed to glow with an inner light. Its mane flowed like spun silver, and its eyes held an intelligence that caused several people to gasp. No one moved to stop the animal as it stepped into the chapel, its hooves making a strangely musical sound against the wooden floor. There was no fear in its bearing, no wild energy, only a solemn dignity that commanded respect. Michael Sullivan rose from his seat, veterinary instincts kicking in despite his grief. "Whose horse is this?" he asked, his voice hoarse from days of crying. No one answered. The horse paid no attention to Michael or to the murmurs that rippled through the gathered mourners. With steady, measured steps, it approached the front of the chapel where Emily's casket lay. Pastor Allen stood frozen at the pulpit, his sermon forgotten, as the magnificent animal came to a halt beside Emily. What happened next would be recounted in Pinewood for generations to come. The white horse lowered its noble head, gazing at Emily's still form with what could only be described as tenderness. Then, in a movement that seemed almost reverent, the animal slowly bent its front legs and knelt beside the casket. A collective gasp rose from the onlookers. Lily Chen clutched her mother's hand and whispered, "It's saying goodbye to Emily." The chapel had fallen completely silent. Even the ambient sounds of the town outside seemed to have hushed. In this perfect stillness, the horse raised its right front hoof and brought it down upon the wooden floor beside the casket. The sound resonated through the chapel like a bell, clear and piercing in its purity. 1 beat, 2, 3. With the third strike, a flicker of movement caught Sarah Sullivan's eye. At first, she thought it was a trick of the light, a cruel hallucination, born of desperate hope. But then it happened again. Emily's fingers twitched. Sarah surged forward, a cry building in her throat. "Michael, look!" All eyes turned to the casket as Emily's eyelids fluttered. Her chest rose with a deep breath, the first she had taken on her own in days. Her lips, which had been pale and still, now parted slightly as a soft sigh escaped them. The monitors still attached to her began to beep with renewed purpose, registering vital signs that had been all but non-existent moments before. Dr. Martinez, who had come to pay her respects and to provide support to the family, pushed through, the crowd in disbelief. "This isn't possible," she whispered, checking Emily's pulse with trembling fingers. "She's stabilizing. I don't understand." Sarah gathered her daughter into her arms, tears streaming down her face. "Emily, baby, can you hear me?" Emily's eyes opened fully, revealing the bright blue that had always reminded Michael of summer skies. She looked confused, disoriented, but undeniably awake, alive. "Mommy." Her voice was faint but clear. "Why is everyone crying?" The chapel erupted in chaos, people shouting, crying, praying, some falling to their knees in shock. Phones were pulled out to call for medical help, to document what was happening, to spread the news of what could only be described as a miracle. Through it all, the white horse remained perfectly still, a statue of gleaming alabaster beside the casket, where life had impossibly returned. Only Lily Chen seemed to notice when the animal finally rose from its kneeling position and turned toward the chapel doors. "Look," she called out, pointing, "the horse is leaving." A few heads turned to watch as the magnificent creature walked with unhurried grace back down the aisle. No one moved to stop it or follow it. They were too transfixed by the miracle unfolding before them. By the time anyone thought to look for the horse again, it had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. Emily was quickly transported back to County General Hospital, where a team of astonished doctors ran test after test, trying to make sense of her remarkable recovery. Her vital signs had stabilized completely. Brain scans showed normal activity where there had been almost none before. Blood work came back showing no signs of the multiple organ failure that had been killing her just hours earlier. "I've been practicing medicine for 27 years, Dr. Martinez told reporters, who had already begun to gather outside the hospital. "I've never seen anything like this. There is no medical explanation for what happened today." News vans from as far away as Denver and Salt Lake City descended on Pinewood. The story of the mysterious white horse and the miracle at the chapel spread like wildfire through social media, drawing curiosity seekers, religious pilgrims, and skeptical investigators to the previously anonymous town. Sarah and Michael Sullivan retreated to the hospital with their daughter, overwhelmed by the attention and still trying to process the emotional whiplash of having their child returned to them from the brink. Emily herself seemed remarkably calm about the whole experience. When gently questioned about what had happened, she would only say that she had been somewhere else and that the horse had called her back. "He told me it wasn't my time yet," she explained to her parents, with a simplicity that belied the profundity of her words. "He said, 'I have important things to do here.'" As word of the miracle spread, theories multiplied. Religious leaders declared it divine intervention. Scientists sought rational explanations. Perhaps Emily had been in a state of suspended animation triggered by an unknown medical condition. Skeptics suggested mass hysteria or an elaborate hoax, though they couldn't explain how a family would fake the detailed medical records that showed Emily's critical condition. The mystery of the white horse deepened when no one in or around Pinewood claimed ownership of such an animal. Local ranchers confirmed that no horse matching that description belonged to any stable in the county. Traffic cameras on the town's main roads showed no horse entering or leaving Pinewood on the day of the miracle. It was as if the magnificent creature had materialized solely for the purpose of saving Emily and then vanished back into the realm of myth. 3 days after her miraculous revival, Emily was released from the hospital. Dr. Martinez called her recovery complete and inexplicable, noting that there was no sign she had ever been ill, let alone at the point of no return. The Sullivans returned home to find their front yard filled with flowers, stuffed animals, and handmade signs welcoming Emily back. News crews camped at the end of their driveway, hoping for an interview or at least a glimpse of the miracle child. Pastor Allen organized volunteers to keep the media at bay and to help the family maintain some semblance of privacy as they readjusted to their restored normality. But normal was a relative term now. Emily was physically the same bright, energetic 7-year-old she had been before her collapse, but there was something different about her, a stillness, a thoughtfulness that hadn't been there before. She spent hours drawing pictures of a white horse in various settings, standing in a meadow of stars, emerging from ocean waves, walking through what looked like golden fields of grain. When Sarah asked about these drawings, Emily would simply smile and say, "He shows me things sometimes in my dreams." The town of Pinewood found itself transformed as well. The miracle had put them on the map in ways both welcome and intrusive. Tourism surged as people came to see the chapel where a horse had seemingly brought a child back from the brink. Local businesses flourished, but many residents mourned the loss of their peaceful anonymity. Some embraced the attention, seeing it as an opportunity for growth. Others resented the constant stream of outsiders asking questions, taking photos, hoping to experience something transcendent for themselves. Through it all, the Sullivans tried to maintain as normal a life as possible for Emily's sake. She returned to school, where her classmates treated her with a mixture of awe and uncertainty. Ms. Wilson worked hard to ensure Emily wasn't treated differently, though it was difficult when parents from other towns began requesting transfers to Pinewood Elementary, hoping some of the miracle might rub off on their own children. Scientists, religious scholars, and paranormal investigators requested interviews with Emily and her family. Most were politely declined, though Sarah and Michael did agree to meet with a respected neurologist from Johns Hopkins who had a special interest in near-death experiences. Dr. Abigail Warner spent an afternoon with Emily, asking gentle questions and showing genuine interest in the child's perspective. Chapter 4: Beyond Explanation. Emily, do you remember anything from when you were asleep? Dr. Warner asked, carefully choosing her words as she sat across from the little girl in the Sullivans' living room. Emily tilted her head, considering the question with a seriousness that seemed beyond her years. I wasn't asleep, she replied simply. I was somewhere else. Sarah and Michael exchanged glances from their position on the couch nearby. They had heard Emily say similar things before, but had been hesitant to press her for details, worried about traumatizing her further. Dr. Warner nodded encouragingly. Can you tell me about this somewhere else? Emily reached for her sketchbook. She had been drawing constantly since her return, and flipped to a page showing a vast landscape of rolling meadows under a sky filled with more stars than seemed possible. It was like this, but more everything. The colors were brighter than any colors here. The air sang when you breathed it. Her small finger traced the outline of a white horse standing on a hilltop in the drawing. He found me there. He said I could stay if I wanted, but that Mommy and Daddy would be very sad, and that I still had important things to do here. Dr. Warner kept her expression neutral, though her pulse had quickened. This horse, was it like the one that came to the chapel? Emily nodded. The same one. But there he could talk to me in my head. He showed me things, the past and the future all mixed up together. She flipped to another page which showed the white horse standing beside what appeared to be an older Emily, perhaps a teenager, in what looked like a hospital room with another child. What's happening in this picture, Emily? Dr. Warner asked. Emily studied her own drawing as if seeing it for the first time. I don't know yet, but the horse says I'll understand when it's time. After Dr. Warner left, promising to keep in touch, Sarah sat beside Emily on her bed. Honey, these things you're saying about the horse talking to you, you know that sounds pretty unusual, right? Emily looked up from her drawing, another scene with the white horse, this time standing at the edge of what looked like a cliff overlooking an ocean. I know, Mommy, but it's true. He's not like regular horses. He's a messenger. She frowned, searching for the right word. A guardian. He watches over people who need him. Sarah stroked her daughter's golden curls, a habit she had developed during the long hours at the hospital, a touchstone of gratitude that her child was still here to be touched. A guardian angel, you mean? Emily shook her head. Not an angel, something older. He was here before the angels. This cryptic statement sent a shiver down Sarah's spine, though she couldn't have explained why. The rational part of her mind wanted to attribute Emily's stories to the imagination of a child processing a traumatic experience. But another part, the part that had witnessed the impossible in that chapel, whispered that there might be more truth in her daughters, words than adult logic could accommodate. As spring deepened into summer, the media frenzy around Pinewood gradually subsided. News cycles moved on to fresher stories, though documentary crews still occasionally appeared in town, hoping to capture something of the miracle for their productions. The Sullivans declined most requests for interviews, protective of Emily, and increasingly aware that her experience went beyond what could be packaged for television specials or magazine features. What they couldn't shield her from, however, was the attention of the townspeople themselves. Pinewood had been transformed by what had happened in the chapel. For some, it was a confirmation of faith. For others, a bewildering mystery that demanded investigation. And for a growing number, Emily herself had become something of a local celebrity, or worse, a figure of superstitious reverence. Women would approach her in the grocery store, asking for her to touch their infants. Elderly, Men would press folded notes into her hands, containing prayers they hoped she might somehow expedite. Children at school alternated between treating her as a curiosity and avoiding her altogether, unsure how to relate to someone who had experienced something so profound. Through it all, Emily maintained a serene demeanor that both reassured and unsettled her parents. "She's different," Michael confessed to Sarah late one night, weeks after the miracle. "Not in a bad way, but it's like she grew up 10 years in the space of a few days." Sarah nodded against his shoulder. "Sometimes I catch her staring at nothing, with this expression on her face, like she's seeing things we can't." Dr. Warner says it's common for people who've had near-death experiences to report feeling changed, more spiritually aware. Michael sighed. "But this goes beyond that, doesn't it? The dreams, the drawings, the things she says about the horse. It's like she brought something back with her, or like part of her is still somewhere else." The summer brought a new development. People began reporting sightings of a white horse on the outskirts of town. A group of teenagers claimed to have seen it standing on a hill at sunset, its coat blazing golden in the dying light. An elderly woman said it had appeared in her garden one morning, eating roses before vanishing when she tried to approach it. The local newspaper ran a front-page story titled "Miracle Horse Return or Mass Delusion," complete with a blurry photograph that could have been any light-colored horse, or a deer or a large dog, or simply a play of light and shadow. Emily, when shown the picture, studied it carefully before handing it back with a slight smile. "That's not him," she said confidently. "When he wants people to see him, they'll know for sure it's him." As summer waned, another peculiar pattern emerged. People who had interacted with Emily, who had spoken with her, received one of her drawings, or simply spent time in her presence, began reporting unusual experiences of their own. Mrs. Henderson, the florist, claimed that after Emily had visited her shop and complimented her daisies, every bouquet she arranged that week lasted twice as long as normal. Mr. Finch, the grumpy owner of the hardware store who had been suffering from debilitating arthritis, found his pain mysteriously reduced after Emily had helped him pick up nails he'd spilled. Lily Chen's grandmother, who had been diagnosed with early-stage dementia, had a day of perfect clarity after Emily spent an afternoon teaching her to make paper cranes. None of these incidents were dramatic enough to make headlines beyond Pinewood, but collectively, they contributed to a growing sense that something extraordinary was unfolding in their midst. The town divided roughly into 3 camps: those who believed Emily had been touched by God and returned with healing powers, those who sought scientific explanations for her apparent abilities, and those who insisted it was all coincidence and suggestion, a community-wide placebo effect triggered by the dramatic events at the chapel. Emily herself offered no explanations. When asked directly about the alleged miracles happening around her, she would shrug and say, "The horse says all of us can do good things for each other if we pay attention." By late August, a new school year loomed. The Sullivans faced a difficult decision. Should Emily return to Pinewood Elementary, where she would inevitably be treated as something other than a normal second grader, or should they consider alternatives? Perhaps homeschooling or enrolling her in a private school in the next county where her story might not be known. The discussion was ongoing when they received an unexpected visitor. Dr. Eleanor Martinez, who had treated Emily during her mysterious illness, arrived at their door one evening, just as the fireflies were beginning to emerge. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by," she said, standing somewhat awkwardly on their porch. "I've been thinking about Emily, about all of you really, and I felt compelled to come." Sarah invited her in, curious about this unannounced visit from the doctor, who had witnessed both the worst and the most miraculous moments of their lives. Dr. Martinez declined coffee, but accepted a seat in their living room, where family photos, including several new ones of Emily, visual affirmations of her continued presence in their lives, crowded the mantelpiece. "I've been reviewing Emily's case," Dr. Martinez began, her professional demeanor softened by evident emotion. "I've consulted with colleagues, studied every test result, considered every possible medical explanation, and I've come to a conclusion that, as a scientist, I'm almost embarrassed to share." Michael leaned forward. "Which is?" Dr. Martinez met his gaze directly. "That what happened to your daughter defies medical explanation. that what I witnessed in that chapel was, well, if I were a religious woman, I'd call it a miracle. Sarah felt a weight lift from her shoulders, the weight of doubt, of wondering. If there was some rational explanation they had all missed, some medical terminology that could categorize and therefore diminish what had happened to their family. "Thank you for saying that," she said softly. "It means a lot coming from you." The doctor wasn't finished. "But that's not why I'm here. I'm here because—" She hesitated, suddenly looking uncomfortable. "This is going to sound strange, but I had a dream last night about Emily and about a white horse. In the dream, the horse told me to come here, that I would be needed." Michael and Sarah exchanged alarmed glances. They had told no one about Emily's ongoing dreams and drawings of the horse, about her insistence that it communicated with her. "What exactly did the horse say in your dream?" Michael asked carefully. Dr. Martinez looked embarrassed. "That Emily's purpose is beginning to reveal itself, that she will need guidance from both science and faith, and that—" She paused, reaching into her bag to pull out a small, velvet pouch. "I should give her this." Chapter 5. The Guardian's Purpose. Sarah called for Emily, who had been in her room drawing. The little girl appeared in the doorway, her expression brightening at the sight of Dr. Martinez. "Hello, Doctor." "Helly," she said, using the nickname she had created during her hospital stay. "Did the horse send you?" The room fell silent. Dr. Martinez's hand, still holding the velvet pouch, trembled slightly. "You know about my dream?" Emily nodded, completely unsurprised. "He told me you were coming. He shows me lots of things now." She crossed the room and sat on the ottoman directly in front of the doctor, looking expectantly at the pouch. "Is that for me?" Dr. Martinez handed it to her, watching with a mixture of wonder and scientific curiosity as Emily carefully untied the drawstring and emptied the contents into her palm. It was a small pendant on a silver chain, a carved horse made of what appeared to be moonstone, its form simple but unmistakable. "It was my grandmother's," Dr. Martinez explained. "She was from a small village in Spain. The horse has been passed down through generations of women in my family, always with the same story, that it protects those who walk between worlds." Emily studied the pendant, turning it over in her small hands. The moonstone caught the light, sending iridescent flashes across her face. "It's beautiful," she said. "Thank you for bringing it to me." With a child's directness, she slipped the chain over her head, the pendant coming to rest just over her heart. "It feels warm." Michael cleared his throat, trying to process what was happening. "Dr. Martinez, Eleanor, what exactly do you mean by walking between worlds?" The doctor shook her head. "I never gave much credence to my grandmother's stories. They seemed like superstition, the kind of folklore that doesn't survive scientific scrutiny. But after what I witnessed with Emily—" She turned to the child. "My grandmother said that some people are born with the ability to see beyond the veil that separates our world from others, that these people can sometimes cross over, especially in moments of great trauma or transition. And that the White Guardian, that's what she called the horse, watches over them, guides them, sometimes brings them back if they're needed here." Emily nodded solemnly. "That's what he told me, that I'm a bridge walker." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. "Emily, you've never mentioned that term before." "I didn't remember it until now," Emily replied simply, fingering the moonstone pendant. "But it's what I am, what Dr. Ellie's grandmother was too." She turned to the doctor. "That's why you became a doctor, to help people like me. The horse told me." Dr. Martinez paled. I never told anyone that. I had a near-drowning experience when I was 12. During those minutes underwater, I saw something, a different place, and a white figure that I always thought was just oxygen deprivation causing hallucinations. It's why I went into medicine, to understand what happened to me." The revelation hung in the air between them, a confirmation of something larger than any of them had dared to articulate. Emily spoke into the silence, her voice holding that peculiar blend of childish simplicity and ancient wisdom that had become her hallmark since her return. "The horse says there are more of us, People who can see the other places, who can help connect the worlds when they need to be connected. Some know what they are, but most don't remember until they're reminded. She touched the pendant again. This helps us recognize each other. As summer gave way to fall, Emily did return to Pinewood Elementary, but with a new understanding between her family and the school. Ms. Wilson, who had witnessed the miracle firsthand, became a fierce protector of Emily's normalcy, insisting that she be treated as any other student, while accommodating the occasional episodes, moments when Emily would become distant, her focus clearly elsewhere, before returning with new drawings or insights. These episodes were kept private, with only Ms. Wilson, the school counselor, and the principal aware of their full nature. To the rest of the world, Emily Sullivan was simply a child who had experienced a remarkable medical recovery. But within Pinewood, a quieter transformation was taking place. Dr. Martinez began working closely with the Sullivan family, documenting Emily's experiences from a scientific perspective, while gradually opening herself to possibilities beyond her medical training. She introduced them to others who had experienced similar phenomena. A firefighter from Colorado who had been clinically dead for 6 minutes after a building collapse, a college professor from Maine who had fallen through ice as a teenager and returned with inexplicable mathematical abilities, a nurse from Louisiana who had survived a lightning strike and afterward could sense when patients were near the transition between life and what came after. A loose network formed, connected by shared experiences that defied conventional explanation and united by the common thread of the White Guardian, the horse that appeared, in different forms across cultures and centuries, but always with the same purpose, to guide the Bridgewalkers. 1 year after Emily's miraculous revival, Pinewood held a quiet commemoration at the chapel. Unlike the media circus that had followed the original event, this gathering was intimate, attended only by those who had been present that day and a few others who had become part of the unfolding story. Emily, now 8 years old, wore the moonstone pendant that never left her neck. She had grown taller, her golden curls a bit darker, but her eyes remained the same startling blue, though many would say they held a depth that no child's eyes should possess. Pastor Allen, who had found his own faith profoundly altered by what he had witnessed, led a simple service of gratitude. There were no mentions of miracles or divine intervention, just acknowledgement of mystery and appreciation for second chances. As the service concluded, Emily slipped away from her parents and walked outside. Sarah followed at a distance, watching as her daughter stood in the chapel garden, face turned up to the autumn sky. "Is she all right?" Michael asked, joining his wife at the door. Sarah nodded. "I think she's listening." They had become accustomed to these moments, times when Emily seemed to be receiving information from somewhere beyond their perception. They no longer questioned it, having accepted that their daughter lived partially in a reality they could not access. After a few minutes, Emily returned, her expression thoughtful. "The horse says I should tell everyone the story now," she announced. "He says it's time for them to understand." Back inside the chapel, the small congregation gathered around as Emily stood at the front, the same spot where the white horse had knelt a year earlier. With poise that belied her age, she began to speak. "The horse is very old," she said. "Older than people, older than most things in our world. He comes from a place where time works differently, where past and future exist together. He watches over the spaces between worlds, the thin places where one reality can touch another." She fingered her pendant, drawing strength from it. "Sometimes, people like me are born with the ability to see these thin places, to step through them. Bridgewalkers, we're called. We usually don't know what we are until something happens, something that pushes us from one world into another." Her gaze swept over the assembled faces, lingering on Dr. Martinez, who nodded encouragingly. "When I got sick, I didn't just fall asleep. I crossed over. And in that other place, I learned things about who I am, about what I'm meant to do. The horse showed me that I needed to come back because there are others like me who need help remembering who they are." Sarah felt tears welling in her eyes. This was the most Emily had ever revealed about her experience, and hearing it articulated so clearly, in a child's voice but with an adult's understanding, made it impossible to dismiss as imagination or trauma. "The horse has many names in many places," Emily continued. Some call him a spirit guide, others a guardian angel. Some think he's a psychopomp. That's a fancy word for someone who helps souls travel between worlds. She smiled at her own use of the complex term. But whatever name people give him, his purpose is always the same: to protect the Bridgewalkers and to help maintain the balance between worlds. Her expression grew more serious. He wanted me to tell you all this because Pinewood is a thin place, a spot where the boundaries between worlds are naturally weaker. That's why he could appear so clearly here, why he could bring me back, and it's why more Bridgewalkers will be drawn here over time. This revelation sent a murmur through the small crowd. Emily raised her hand, a surprisingly authoritative gesture from such a small person. It's nothing to be afraid of. It's actually a gift. Thin places have always been centers of healing and wisdom. The horse says Pinewood has a purpose now, to be a sanctuary for people like me, a place where the boundaries can be understood and honored. As Emily concluded her remarkable speech, a shaft of late afternoon sunlight broke through the stained glass windows, casting a rainbow of colors across the chapel floor, colors that seemed somehow more vivid, more real than they should have been. Several people gasped and Emily smiled. "He's listening," she said simply. In the days that followed, Emily's revelation sparked deep conversations throughout Pinewood. Some residents were uncomfortable with the idea of their town becoming known as a center for such unusual phenomena. Others embraced the possibility, seeing economic and spiritual opportunities in this new identity. The Sullivans found themselves at the center of it all, trying to balance their desire to support Emily's apparent calling with their instinct to protect her from those who might exploit or misunderstand her abilities. Dr. Martinez proved an unexpected ally. With her medical credentials and growing acceptance of realities beyond scientific explanation, she helped establish a small research center on the outskirts of town, officially dedicated to the study of consciousness and perception, but quietly focused on documenting and supporting Bridgewalkers as they found their way to Pinewood. As word spread through the networks of those who had experienced similar phenomena, the town began to receive visitors of a different sort. Not curiosity seekers or miracle hunters, but individuals drawn by dreams of a white horse, by inexplicable compulsions to visit this small Montana community, by the sensation that answers to long-held questions awaited them there. Emily, with wisdom beyond her years, helped identify the true Bridgewalkers among them. Some stayed, finding in Pinewood a community that accepted their unusual perceptions. Others came only long enough to receive guidance before returning to their own communities, newly aware of their unique abilities and responsibilities. Sarah and Michael watched their daughter grow into her role with a mixture of pride and trepidation. There were challenges, moments when Emily's consciousness seemed to slip too far into the other realms, times when the weight of her knowledge seemed too heavy for her small shoulders. But there were also moments of transcendent joy, of connections forged across boundaries most people never perceived, of healing that defied conventional understanding. On the evening of Emily's 9th birthday, as a small celebration wound down and guests departed the Sullivan home, Sarah found her daughter, standing on the back porch, gazing at the star-filled Montana sky. The moonstone pendant gleamed at her throat, catching the light from the kitchen window. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," Sarah said, wrapping a blanket around Emily's shoulders against the autumn chill. "Penny, for your thoughts?" Emily leaned against her mother, a gesture that reminded Sarah that for all her unusual abilities, her daughter was still a child seeking comfort and security. "I was thinking about the first time I saw him, the horse, not at the chapel but in the other place. He was so beautiful, Mom, so bright it almost hurt to look at him, but kind too." Sarah stroked her daughter's hair. "Do you miss it? That other place?" Emily considered the question carefully. Sometimes it was peaceful there, and everything made sense in a way it doesn't always do here. "But I would have missed you and Dad more." She turned to look up at her mother, her blue eyes reflecting the starlight. And the horse was right. "I have important things to do here." "Like helping other Bridgewalkers?" Sarah asked. Emily nodded. "And helping everyone remember that the world is bigger and more wonderful than we think. That's what he wants people to know, that there's more to everything than what we can see, and that it's beautiful." not scary. As if in response to her words, a warm breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of wildflowers that shouldn't have been blooming in October. Both mother and daughter felt it, a momentary thinning of the veil between worlds, a gentle acknowledgement from the White Guardian who watched over them all. "He's always near," Emily whispered, "even when we can't see him, especially then." In that moment, Sarah Sullivan understood that her daughter's miracle hadn't ended in the chapel a year ago. It was ongoing, unfolding day by day as Emily helped bridge the gap between what was known and what was possible, between the world as most perceived it and the deeper realities that lay just beyond ordinary sight. And somewhere in the spaces between worlds, a white horse continued his ancient vigil, guiding the bridge walkers home whenever they strayed too far.